The moment my boss touched the ivory silk hanging in the back of the shop and whispered that it was the most beautiful dress she had ever seen, I felt my whole body go cold, because that dress was not for sale. That dress was never supposed to leave the storage room, and the answer I gave her that night would end up unraveling a secret I had buried for 3 years. If you believe in second chances, in kindness that arrives when you least expect it, and in the idea that broken people can still build something beautiful out of their pain, then stay with me until the end of this video. And please take a moment to like this video, drop a comment, share it with someone who needs a little hope today, and subscribe to this channel so you never miss a story like this one. My name is Daniyal, and 3 years ago I was a tailor with nothing left to lose. I want to be honest with you, because this story only means something if I tell it the way it really happened. I did not start out working in a bridal boutique. I started out in a small rented room above a mechanic's shop, sewing hems for neighbors who paid me in vegetables and prayers instead of money, because that was all they had, and because I was too proud to ask for more. My wife, Areej, was the reason I even knew how to hold a needle properly. She had trained under her mother, a seamstress who had stitched wedding dresses for half the brides in our town. And when Areej and I got married, she promised that one day we would open a bridal shop together, one where every bride, rich or poor, would walk out feeling like the most beautiful version of herself. We never got that shop. Areej passed away 11 months after our wedding, from an illness that ate through her strength faster than any doctor could explain, and the last thing she ever finished sewing, with hands that trembled more each day, was her own wedding dress, the one she never got to wear anywhere except the one evening it mattered, the evening she became my wife. After she was gone, I could not bring myself to sell that dress or give it away or even look at it directly for months. I folded it into a box, and I carried that box with me every single time I moved, through 4 different rooms in 3 different cities, because it was the only thing I had left of the life we were supposed to build together. For a long time after losing her, I stopped believing in anything. I worked mechanically, stitching whatever came to me, charging barely enough to survive, sleeping in a small room with a single window that let in more cold than light. People around me moved on with their lives, got married, had children, celebrated things, and I watched all of it from a distance, the way you watch rain through a window when you cannot go outside. I am not ashamed to admit that there were nights I sat with that box in my lap and asked myself what the point of continuing even was. But something in me, maybe stubbornness, maybe the memory of Areej's voice telling me that our hands were made to give people joy, kept pulling me back to the needle and thread every single morning. 2 years ago, I finally found steady work at a small but respected bridal boutique on the busier side of the city, owned by a woman named Meherbano. She was sharp, composed, and carried herself like someone who had built her success brick by brick without anyone's help. She hired me because, in her words, my stitching had a kind of sadness in it that made the fabric feel alive, which I did not understand at the time, but I think I understand it now. I kept my head down, did my work, altered gowns, repaired lace, fixed hems for brides who barely noticed the man quietly working in the back room. I did not talk about my past. I did not talk about Areej. I simply worked, because work was the only thing that kept the grief from swallowing me whole. The shop was usually locked and empty by 9 in the evening, but that particular night I had stayed late finishing an order that was due the next morning, and I made the mistake of bringing my box with me, because I had promised myself I would finally repair a small tear along the hem of Areej's dress that had been bothering me for weeks. I laid the dress out carefully on the work table under the single lamp, and for the first time in a long while, I let myself really look at it, at every stitch she had placed with her own weakening hands, at the tiny embroidered flowers near the collar that she had insisted on finishing herself even when I begged her to rest. I did not hear Meherbano come back into the shop. She told me later she had forgotten her phone and returned quietly, and when she saw the dress glowing under that single light, she stopped in the doorway and simply stared. I turned and found her standing there, one hand resting gently against the doorframe, her eyes fixed on the ivory silk, and in a voice softer than I had ever heard her use, she whispered that it was the most beautiful dress she had ever seen, and asked, almost breathlessly, where I had found something like it, because nothing in her own shop, with all its imported fabrics and expensive lace, came close to whatever this was. I could have lied. I could have told her it belonged to a client, or that I had made it as a sample piece, and she probably would have believed me and moved on. But something about the way she looked at that dress, the way her voice cracked slightly on the word beautiful, made me tell her the truth. I told her it was my wife's wedding dress, the only wedding dress she ever wore, and that she had stitched every inch of it herself in the final months of her life, when she barely had the strength to sit upright, because she wanted to leave something behind that was entirely her own. I told her Areej passed away less than a year after our wedding, and that I had carried this dress through every difficult year since, unable to let it go, unable to even properly look at it until tonight. The room went completely silent after that. Meherbano did not say anything for what felt like a very long time. She simply walked closer, knelt slightly beside the table, and touched the hem with the kind of care you would use on something sacred. When she finally spoke again, her voice was shaking, and she told me something I never expected to hear from a woman who always seemed untouchable. She told me that in 3 weeks she was supposed to get married, to a man her family had chosen for her, a man she barely knew, in a wedding she had agreed to simply because she had convinced herself that love the way people describe it in stories was not real, that it was something people invented to make ordinary practical arrangements feel less lonely. She told me she ran a bridal shop every single day, dressing other women for the happiest day of their lives, while quietly believing that kind of happiness was not something meant for her. Looking at Areej's dress that night, she said, she finally understood what she had been missing. Not the fabric or the embroidery, but the love stitched into every single thread. Love strong enough to keep working even while dying. Love that outlasted the person who made it. She asked me, with tears she did not bother hiding, how I found the strength to keep going after losing something like that, how I still showed up to work every day, still created beauty for other people's weddings while carrying my own unfinished one in a box. I told her the truth, the same truth I am telling you now. I said that grief does not disappear. And I do not think it ever fully does, but you learn to carry it differently. In the beginning it feels like a weight crushing you into the ground, and you cannot imagine standing upright again. But slowly, if you let it, that same weight becomes something else. It becomes proof that you loved deeply, and that the love was real, and that it mattered. I told her I kept sewing not because it healed me completely, but because every stitch felt like a small conversation with Areej. A way of keeping her hands moving through mine. I told her that happiness does not always arrive the way we expect it to. Sometimes it is loud and sudden, and sometimes it is quiet, showing up in the shape of a single honest conversation on an ordinary evening after the shop has closed. Meherbano left that night without saying much else, but something had clearly shifted in her. Over the following days, she started coming in earlier, staying later, asking quiet questions about how I chose fabrics, how I decided where to place each stitch, questions that had nothing to do with running a business and everything to do with understanding what she had been avoiding in herself. 2 weeks later, 3 days before her scheduled wedding, she called off the engagement entirely. Her family was furious. Her relatives whispered for months, but she told me later that she could not walk down an aisle toward a life built on convenience when she had finally seen with her own eyes what it looked like when someone stitched their entire soul into something out of love. If this story has touched you even a little bit so far, I want to ask you gently to like this video and share it with someone in your life who might need a reminder that it is never too late to choose honesty over comfort and love over convenience, and I promise the ending of this story is worth staying for. What happened next surprised even me. Meherbano did not simply move on quietly. She asked if she could feature Areej's story, with my permission, as the inspiration behind a small new collection at the boutique, dresses made slowly, imperfectly, by hand, each one carrying a piece of somebody's real story instead of just fabric and thread. She insisted my name go on the collection alongside hers, not as an employee tucked away in the back room, but as a partner, someone whose grief and skill had quietly built the heart of her business without her even realizing it. I refused at first, out of habit, out of years of making myself small so the pain would not take up too much space. But she reminded me of something I had told her that very first night, that love does not disappear, it becomes something else if you let it. And she asked me why I was allowing my own advice to reach everyone except myself. Today, that small collection has become the most requested line in the shop, not because of clever marketing, but because every bride who wears one of those dresses says the same thing, that it feels like it was made with love instead of just skill. And I suppose, in a strange way, they are right. Areej's dress sits framed now in a glass case near the entrance of the shop, not hidden in a box anymore, but honored, seen, exactly the way she deserved to be seen while she was alive. I still think about her every single day, and I probably always will. But I no longer feel like I am carrying her memory alone in a dark room. I feel like I am finally letting her light reach other people, the way she always wanted to. If this story touched something in you, even a small part of your heart. Please do not scroll away just yet. Take a moment to like this video, leave a comment telling me what part of the story moved you the most, share it with someone who might need a little hope today, and subscribe to this channel so you do not miss the next story like this one. Before you go, I would really love to know, in the comments below, which country you are watching this from tonight, because it means so much to know how far these small, real stories are able to travel